Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Blink. The Blink is a conversation of life, love, and gratitude, and I am your host, Tanisha Campbell, one of four community relations coordinators. We understand that life can happen in the blink of an eye. Here at Gift of Life Michigan MOTEP, the Minority Organ Tissue Transplant Education Program, we want to share stories of those impacted in the blink. In a blink. This series will feature donor families, recipients, volunteers, and advocates. The Blink is designed to bring you real stories of real individuals and families. If you would like to be a guest on The Blink, contact me at tcampbell@golm.org or visit us at Volunteer Hub. Today, we have a special guest, Mary Jo, who had a life-saving liver transplant. Mary Jo is here to share her story with us. Welcome, Mary Jo. We are so happy to have you here at the Blink today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us and taking the time to listen to the story.
So we are going to hop right into it today, okay, Mary Jo?
Sure.
So let's start with a little bit of your background. Tell us who you are, what some of your interests are, who are your closest family members, or what is one of your most memorable moments in life?
Well, my family is very close. My parents are originally from West Virginia, and now we live here in Michigan. And I guess probably my favorite thing is to spend time with family. I grew up where we would take family vacations, and it wasn't just my family. We would all meet my mom's brothers and sisters at a hotel in Myrtle Beach. And it was so much fun, like going out to dinner and asking for a table for 25 or 30. And I love spending time with my cousins, and I still do.
That's awesome.
That's probably one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it was exciting for me to hear you say Myrtle Beach because that's one of the places when I was a little younger, my family and I would take a trip to Myrtle Beach, and there would be tons of us there.
Yeah.
I heard you say 25. It would be about, I say it would be between about 15 to 20 of us there at Myrtle Beach, having a great time. And it was always fun when you go to the restaurant and say, hey, can I have a table for 15?
Yeah.
And people look at you like you're a little strange.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine how they looked when you asked for a table of 25.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times they would put us in our own private room, but we like that because we are kind of loud.
Yeah, I don't think we ever got our own private room, but we were close to it in numbers. If we would have went up a little bit in the numbers, we probably would have got our own private room too.
Yep.
So, what have you experienced that has happened to you in the blink of an eye?
Well, my story is a little unusual. My brother and I were born with a very rare genetic metabolic disease. Okay. And when my brother, who is older than me, when he was born, my mom knew something was wrong with him, but she didn't know really what it was. And he was crying all the time and sick all the time. And the pediatrician told her to leave him inside the house alone. And she go for a walk and let him cry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, this was back in 1957. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. And my mom, she was young. She was only 19. Her and my dad got married when she was like 17.
Okay.
Right out of high school. And so she took my brother over to the U of M emergency room. And they didn't know what was wrong with him. All they knew was that he had a very distended, large stomach. Mm-hmm. And that was because his liver was very large. And so they were talking about they were going to do exploratory surgery on him. And then a doctor happened to come on duty and said, I was just reading something in a medical journal about these symptoms. And that doctor was correct in his diagnosis. And it was called von Gerke's disease, which is a glycogen storage disease, type 1A.
Okay.
And so that doctor was our pediatrician and took care of both of us and my sister because he didn't want her to feel left out until we were all 18. And he was an incredible doctor. When we were kids, when we were in and out of the hospital a lot. And so back then, parents couldn't stay. They were very strict visiting hours. And so he always, no matter if he was out on campus somewhere teaching a lecture, he would always walk back to the hospital to come and tell me goodnight and check on me.
Oh, that's a caring doctor right there.
Exactly. I mean, it'd be, sometimes 8 o'clock at night, and he would do that before going home after he had already spent, a 13-hour day.
Right. And that always makes a patient feel better. And I can definitely see how it would make your parents even more comfortable with him, knowing that they have a caring physician taking care of their children.
Absolutely. And he came to my brother's 50th birthday party. And then for mine, he couldn't come. He was actually out of town with his daughter on a trip to Asia. And then he passed away about a year ago. But I stayed in touch with him the whole time, all through the years. And I consulted with him actually on whether I should have the transplant or not.
Okay.
I just called him at home and asked for his opinion. He had retired years before, and we went to his retirement party and surprised him. And
wow, that's nice.
He loved that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, our disease is one of the biggest complications in it is we were born without the capability to break food down properly into nutrients and sugars and things that you need to be able to sustain yourself.
Okay.
And so what we had to do to combat that was first we drank dextrose mixed in very hot water every 3 hours. And that was 24/7 around the clock. We had to get up all through the night, no matter what. And if we didn't do that, we would get very sick very quickly.
I had to do this as a child?
Oh, yeah, since we were babies.
Okay.
And we couldn't keep our blood sugar up is why we had to do that. We couldn't break food down properly. We couldn't break down proteins and carbohydrates and any of those things. So we didn't get nutrients either the way we should have.
Oh, wow.
And as far as myself, and also my brother has difficulties too, a lot of it is stored as fat.
Okay.
And so, anyways, we had to drink the dextrose. And anytime we got an infection or anything like that, made it harder for us to be able to keep our blood sugars up and keep everything going. And if we didn't take our medicine properly, we could go into convulsions or a coma or death. And sometimes it was a combination of those things.
Oh, wow.
There was many times where my parents had to rush us to the hospital, into the emergency room. When we were kids, my pediatrician I was telling you about, he actually, in the pediatrics clinic that he was over, he had a closet that he would keep what he needed for us to be able to stabilize us. He would keep IVs and things in there, whatever he needed. And so he would actually meet us at those doors, and we would bypass the ER. And him and his nurse would meet us there. And he would unlock the doors for us and rush us in. And then him and his nurse would set us up and get those IVs in us as quick as possible. And that's
an
what would
amazing
put our
physician.
blood sugars up.
Yeah.
To try to stabilize us.
He was definitely an amazing physician. But I can only
very much so.
Hearing part of your story, I can only imagine like what your parents felt like seeing this happen to both of their children at the same time. Was this a genetic gene that your parents carried that caused you all to have this disease?
Yes.
And exactly. How rare is this disease?
What?
How rare is this disease?
Well, when we were growing up, until we started getting more into, and the internet started coming online, we were told there was only around 250 people worldwide that had been born with it. And when we were young, we were also told that the oldest person that they were aware of had lived to be about 32. So we weren't expecting a long life. But my mom and my parent, my dad too, both of them, they always told us and taught us to live our life and, not think in those terms.
Right.
And so that's what we did. And so we, we did everything we had to do to be able to go to school. And actually, public school didn't want to let us in because of our complications. Back in the early 60s, they weren't as accepting of people, of kids, and kids would go to special education and that type of thing. And my parents said, oh no, they're going to regular school with everybody else. And so what they had to do was they had to move into a school district where my aunt taught. And the principal and the superintendent, they agreed to let us in, but my aunt had to make sure, and she was responsible for us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so the school nurse, she was always terrified to help us or anything. So she would go and get my aunt out of her classroom, and the nurse would sit in her classroom until my aunt was done with us. Okay. Because one of the complications we would have were really severe nosebleeds. And so she would go get my aunt to help us with those when that happened. The other complications from the disease are the very severe blood sugars that we had to take the medications for, and also tumors. And these tumors can be benign and sometimes cancerous. So as we were growing up, though, my parents always, pushed us to be as normal as possible. And that's what we wanted to do, too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, out there now, a lot of parents don't agree with raising us that way. And so I've had to really push some of the parents and have had my spoke my piece about how important it is to raise these kids as normal as possible and not shelter them, because I've tried to install in them that it's possible for us to do whatever we wanted to do.
Yeah.
I had more difficulties than my brother as far as physical wise, because when I was a kid, another thing that happened was our bones were very fragile when we were younger. And I broke my leg and then re-broke it when I was getting ready to get the cast off. So then I ended up with a cast up to my chest for a year. And when that cast came off, my legs were disfigured. And
Oh,
so I could not, run as quickly as other kids and
mhm.
that type of thing. But my brother, he did a lot better as far as that. For instance, in high school, he played baseball for the high school team. He was born with a baseball in his hand. He's always been that way.
Mhm.
And so I tried to do as many things as I could. I was into baton twirling growing up, and I competed. And then in high school, I went out and became a majorette. Um, so I liked doing that type of thing. As I got older, I started having more complications. I was having a more difficult time keeping my blood sugar levels up. And I did my brother and I both did research studies in the hospital where I think the longest time my brother stayed in was 3 months, and the longest I was in was 4 months, where they would test a new medication out on us to see if it would work better. The one I did when I was in senior in high school, unfortunately, it didn't do well at all, and I ended up almost dying. Um, but a friend of ours who also has the disease, she tested another product which actually was successful and is what is still used today on patients that are born with this disease. And
Okay.
that, believe it or not, is cornstarch. And
Really?
it's mixed in water. And I would drink that every 5 hours, 24/7, instead of the dextrose that I
Oh,
used
wow.
to drink every 3 hours. So I got a little 2 more hours of sleep.
Right. And you'd be amazing what those 2 more hours would do.
Exactly.
When did you when did you find out that you would need a transplant?
Well, as I got older as an adult, I was having more problems keeping my blood sugar levels up.
Okay.
I got to the point where I was having to use cornstarch plus dextrose to
Okay.
try to boost them up. My blood sugar levels would go from 100 to the low teens for
Oh,
no reason at all.
okay.
Just sitting and watching TV, it'd suddenly drop.
Hmm.
And so it was very difficult trying to balance all that. Plus, I worked full time. I was involved in church. Um, I taught vacation Bible school art classes and things like that. So um, the other thing was is my tumors. The first one they discovered, I was probably around 14, and as I started getting older and my blood sugar levels were getting worse, my tumors started multiplying like crazy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that's when my doctor said that I needed to go on the transplant list.
Okay.
And he had to go before several boards and really push for me to be able to get approved, because there had never been a successful transplant before. on a person with my disease. It had been attempted twice in California, but both people passed away within a month.
Okay.
And so for him to go before the medical boards that he needed to go before and say, hey, I want to try this again, it wasn't easy. But we got approved for myself. And so I was on the wait list for about 3 years. I was up high on the list, but there was a long time where they just weren't getting the donors at all. And then I was brought in for 3 different livers, kind of like Goldilocks and 3 Bears, I call it. And the first liver, it was not the right size.
Okay.
My liver was about the size of 1.5 footballs, which is much larger than the average liver. And so I also have a larger space in there.
Okay.
And the first one that they took out of the donor was too large for me, which they were surprised at. The second liver, they brought me in and they prepped me like they did the first time. And they wheeled me back and were taking me through the doors into the OR. So I thought we were good to go this time. And then they pulled me back, the stretcher back out of the OR doors. I'm like, where are you going? We're supposed to go through the doors. And they said, well, we got to go back to pre-op. So they took me back into the pre-op and they explained that the second liver, when they were going to put it in me, the surgeon that was in there, he said he just got this funny feeling that he needed to do this test on it, that they don't ever do this test on livers. But just at the last second, he said he just got this thing in his head that he needed to try something. And so he did this little simple test on the liver and found out that that liver would have failed if it would have been put in anyone. And so that's why I didn't have the second liver.
And I think it's important right here to let people know that when it comes to receiving a transplant, there is a vigorous list of things that has to be met in order for a recipient to receive an organ.
Yes.
Because no matter what, you want that recipient to be able to live a great life after they receive an organ transplant.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's important for people to realize that physicians or your doctors, they do absolutely everything they can do when it comes to transplants to make sure that the person receiving that transplant, and not only that person that's receiving it, but that donor that it comes from is respected enough to have donate to a person in the proper way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the third liver, they brought me in, and that one was all good to go. And I'll never forget, like, one of the surgeons on one of the times was Dr. Jeffrey Punch, who was later the director of the U of M Transplant Center. And him running down the hallway with this cooler carrying this liver in it. And he was all excited. He's like, we're going to do surgery. We're going to do surgery. I'm like, okay, let's go. In the meantime, they're putting all kinds of IVs in me. And, they run all kinds of tests. When you're in pre-op, they have to do all kinds of x-rays and they check your blood. And they want to make sure everything is functioning as well as possible before they do this. And so they did the surgery. And when the surgeon removed my old liver, they looked at it and they thought, well, this is kind of unusual because normally when they remove a liver, usually they kind of look in appearance like something's wrong with them, but mine didn't. And so they're like, why are we taking this out of this girl?
Right.
And so the doctor, he, because they didn't know, the doctors that did my surgery didn't know a lot of the backstory on my
Okay.
case. And so then one of the big things that was really important to me was I wanted to make sure that samples of my liver were sent down to the glycogen storage disease clinic that was at the time the only one around in North Carolina at Duke University, for them to be able to study it because they had never had a live donor before.
Okay.
A person who was still alive that was able to donate parts of their liver with the disease. They had had a couple of deceased donors that they had had before, but they were waiting for mine. And so the surgeon in the OR, he was like, well, I've got to, make these samples anyways. I'm just going to, look at this liver anyways while I'm doing this. And so he touched it with like just a prong, and my liver instantly deflated on the table.
Wow.
And come to find out that not all of my tumors were showing up on scans and stuff because my liver had turned into just a mass of tumors. There wasn't hardly anything holding it together.
Really?
And so that's why I was having so many complications.
Okay.
So that was something that was kind of unusual. So then after I had my transplant, it was, a recovery process, but I did pretty well at it. I was only in the hospital for, it was close to 2 weeks, I think, but that's not bad at all because a lot of people are in for a lot longer. And I went back to work in about 3.5 months. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, that's not bad for
That's not
having
bad
a
at
liver
all.
transplant.
If you could tell your donor and your donor family something, what would you say to them?
Probably thank you, because the biggest thing is family is so important to me and always has been. And by receiving that liver, um, they told me after looking at my actual liver after taking it out, they said I would not have seen my next birthday that was in 3 weeks.
Oh.
And so that means I would have passed away before I was 40. And there were so many things I would have missed. I would have missed my nieces getting married. And, now she has children who are the most adorable little things you ever did see. And then also my nephew's wedding, and he now has 4 children and 2 grandchildren, and I got to see my nephew grow up because I never missed a little league game in his high school baseball games, and now he's engaged. So that's the biggest thing, is being able to see all the things that I would have never gotten to see, and spending time with my family. I was very close to my dad unfortunately, we lost him a few years ago. He died unexpectedly in his sleep from heart problems.
Sorry to hear
But
about
I
that.
still have my mom, and I now live with my mom. Um, so that's the biggest thing, is being able to spend time with my family and do things. And I've done some traveling. I've done some traveling on my own,
Mm-hmm.
which I would have never been able to do. And so when I was working, I was known for, I would take a week or two off and I would hit Myrtle Beach by myself. If nobody else could go, I was still going.
Go have a good time by yourself.
That's right. I would fly down and rent me a car and a condo, and I was good to go. I knew where all the places were.
Right. So we are coming to the end of this conversation today.
Okay.
One last question that I would like to ask you is, if you could encourage a person that is waiting for a life-saving transplant or a life-enhancing transplant, what are some words that you would leave with them?
Patience. Um, Once you get put on that waiting list, pack a bag that you're going to take to the hospital with, put it in your closet, and then forget about it. Go to your doctor appointments, like you normally would, that they request, but otherwise live your life. And then when the time comes that you start getting the calls for the surgery, is when the time comes. It's most important, though, not to worry about it every single day. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get it anytime. Is it going to be today? Is it going to be tomorrow? You
Mm-hmm.
can't think in those terms. I had a very long discussion with my dad when I first went on the list, and I was trying to decide on whether to go on the list. And he said, once you make that decision, you make it and then forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, there used to be two fabulous nurses at U of M, Vicky Sheik and Libby Ford, who I absolutely adore. And they told me the same thing. They said, pack your bag, put it in the closet, go to your appointments as needed, but otherwise you live your life. And so
That's
that's what I did.
That sounds like great advice. I guess patience go a long way,
Yeah.
and it's always great to have. We
And
definitely
faith and was also big to me too.
faith, yes,
And trust in your doctors.
trust. I agree. I agree. But we thank you for joining us today and
You're
sharing
welcome.
your story with us. I feel like this conversation could go on and on and on, and we could probably be here for another hour, hour and a half.
That's probably true.
Yes, I definitely agree. And maybe one day we'll come back and explore your story a little bit more, go a little bit more into details
Sure.
and share it with people as well. But I definitely want to thank you for joining us today on The Blink.
You're very welcome.
Um, and for those of you who are out there watching us today on The Blink, I want to thank you all for joining us as well. We will have another conversation next Thursday on September 16th. We will have a conversation with an avid skier and his journey to transplantation. If you would like to join the Blink or join this conversation, you can email me, Tanisha Campbell, at tcampbell, that's TCAMPBELL at GOLM.org, or visit Volunteer Hub to sign up. And as always, sign up on the Organ Donor Registry at GOLM.org. Until next time, we thank you for joining us here at The Blink.
Bye, everybody.